Have you ever hit the end of the day, or let's be honest, maybe even the middle of it, and just felt completely wiped out? I'm not talking about just being tired. I mean that deep, bone-deep exhaustion where even thinking about making dinner feels like a monumental task. And if that sounds familiar, trust me, you are so not alone. So today, we're going to get into it. We're explaining why modern life feels so unbelievably draining. First things first, let's just get this out of the way. This feeling, it's not on you. It's not some kind of personal failure or a sign that you're just not cut out for this. It's a massive, shared experience, and a huge part of the problem is this constant, crushing pressure to live up to everyone else's standards.
Right, so that's the big question, isn't it? If it's not just a me problem, then what is going on? Why does it feel like everything, from our jobs to running errands to just scrolling on our phones, is sucking more and more energy out of us? To figure that out, we need to zoom out and look at the whole system.
And believe me, the numbers here tell a pretty stark story. This isn't just a vague feeling. It's a real, measurable trend. Get this. In just 1 year, from 2017 to 2018, the number of adults in the U.S. dealing with a mental illness jumped by a staggering 1.5 million people. That's a huge red flag that something in our environment is putting us all under incredible strain.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this exhaustion, we've got to start with the massive economic and social system that we're all living in. And a big part of that system has been shaped by an idea called neoliberalism.
So what exactly is this thing? Well, in a nutshell, neoliberalism is the idea that the absolute best way for society to work is to let the free market do its thing with as few rules as possible. The theory is that if everyone competes as an individual and the government stays out of the way, that will somehow create the best outcome for everybody. And this way of thinking really took over starting around the 1980s. In this slide, wow, this really lays out just how dramatic that shift was. On the left, you've got the era after World War II. The focus then was on collective well-being. The government stepped in and strong unions were there to protect workers. But since the 80s, you can see on the right, the whole thing flipped. It became all about deregulation, privatization, and a massive emphasis on the individual. We basically went from a society that said, we're all in this together, to one that says, you're on your own.
And here is what that looks like in your wallet. Over a 40-year period, the income for the top 1% absolutely exploded, shooting up by over 160%. And for the other 90% of us, our wages have pretty much flatlined. All while the cost of, well, everything, just keeps going up. It's a recipe for constant financial stress and insecurity for almost everyone.
So the bottom line is, this big economic idea has very real consequences that pile on the stress in our daily lives. It means things like tougher working conditions, workers having less power, social safety nets being cut, and a culture that is just obsessed with buying stuff and competing with each other. It's a perfect storm for chronic anxiety.
All right, so that's the big picture. Now let's zoom in on where most of us feel this pressure day in and day out, our jobs.
Just look at this number. When you combine the findings from a whole bunch of studies, you see that a whopping 72% of people feel like they have to reply to work messages after their shift is over. The line between work and home hasn't just gotten blurry. For so many of us, it's just gone.
And this brings us to a concept that is so true, it kind of hurts. It's called the paradox of flexibility. You know, we've got all these tools that promise freedom. Email on our phones, Slack, working from home. But that freedom has a dark side. It's created this invisible leash, this unspoken expectation that you should be available pretty much all the time, no matter where you are.
And no surprise here, being on all the time means our brains never get a chance to actually switch off and recharge. It's a direct pipeline to stress, to burnout, and to that deep mental fatigue that we're trying to understand.
Okay, so we've looked at the system and we've looked at the workplace. Now let's get personal. Let's talk about what all this is actually doing inside our own heads. And this is a really important question, right? Because this isn't just about feelings of stress. These outside pressures are having a real physical effect on our brains. Yes, scientists actually have a name for this, frontal fatigue. And the best way to think about it is to imagine the front part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, the part that does all the heavy lifting like focusing and making decisions. Imagine it's a muscle. Modern life, with its endless pings, choices, and to-do lists, is like making that muscle do bicep curls all day, every day, without a break. And just like any muscle, it gets exhausted. So how can you tell if your brain's muscle is getting overworked? Well, see if any of these sound familiar. First, attention strain. You're struggling to focus, maybe chugging coffee just to get through a simple task. Then there are memory lapses, like forgetting a simple word or where you left your keys.
Third, multitasking just feels impossible. Switching between things is way harder than it used to be. And finally, emotional slips. You just feel more irritable or find yourself saying things that are a little out of character. These are all signs your brain is telling you it needs a break.
Okay, that was a lot, I know. We've gone from the whole economic system down to our own brain cells. So the big question is, what on earth do we do about it? Well, the good news is we can fight back. But it has to be a two-part strategy. We have to fight this on two different levels at the same time. On one side, we absolutely need big systemic change that gets to the root causes of the problem in our society and our jobs. And on the other side, we need our own personal practices to build some resilience and claw back some mental peace in our day-to-day lives.
So on the big scale, this is about creating workplaces that don't burn people out by design. We're talking about things like right-to-disconnect policies that protect your personal time, making bosses actually accountable for their team's health, and using data to make sure workloads are fair. It's about setting clear rules for communication and making sure these protections apply to everyone, not just a select few. And hey, while we're pushing for those huge changes, there are things we can do right now to give our poor, tired brains a rest. The idea is simple. Give that overworked prefrontal cortex a break by using other parts of your brain. Do something with your hands, like cooking or gardening. Engage your senses. Go for a walk in the woods. Really listen to a piece of music. And connect with other humans, face-to-face, without a screen in between.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really big question to chew on. When we focus on self-care to cope with all this exhaustion, are we taking part in a quiet revolution by taking back our own well-being? Or are we just distracting ourselves from the much bigger fight for the systemic changes that would make our world less exhausting for everyone? The real answer? It's probably a bit of both, isn't it?